The case of another haunting in Canada was told Elliott O'Donnell by a Dr. Fanshawe and his wife, who had had a rather curious experience. The doctor took from his pocket a small leather pouch and, opening it, showed O'Donnell a dull blue stone. "Are you a geologist?" the doctor said. "No," O'Donnell replied. "What is it?" "No one has ever been able to tell me," the doctor said. "I have shown it to several professors, and they have each classified it differently. None of them had ever seen a stone like it. But let me tell you the history of the stone. 5 years ago, we rented a house on the outskirts of London, Ontario. It was a 2-story house standing back from the road. Opposite the house was a large pit, a disused quarry. Rain had filled it with water that was icy cold even in summer. Viewed in daytime, the quarry was ordinary enough. But at dusk, I remember marveling at this metamorphosis the first day of our arrival. It was July, and the landscape was vividly aglow with brilliant sunlight, a more radiant scene you could not imagine. "One might make a capital swimming hole of this," I said to my wife, as we wandered to the edge of the pit and peered down at the silent, sparkling water. That was in the morning. In the evening, the place looked very different. In fact, I hardly recognized it. It had undergone a complete change. The banks were higher, the water dark and sinister, and there was a cold dreariness about the place that made me shiver. It was utterly forlorn and murderous. On the opposite bank were a few rank sedges and the white trunks of decaying trees adding to the general dreariness. I suddenly felt I was being watched, and looking up, I saw, on the opposite bank, a huge granite boulder. I was sure something was behind it, crouching down and glaring at me. I also felt convinced that this thing, which I could not actually see, was some strange hybrid of a man and animal, a thing with limbs like ours, but the face of some fantastic, mocking, malevolent beast. Filled with a great uneasiness and all manner of vague fears, I hurried back to the house. I said nothing about it to my wife, but 2 days later she came to me in a state of great agitation. "Why, what is the matter, Margaret?" I cried. "You've gone very white. Are you ill?" "No," she said, "but I've had a shock." "I was walking in the garden," she said, "when I heard a great rustling of leaves. I turned round and saw a violent agitation going on in the branches of an apple tree. I came nearer, and as I did, something heavy dropped to the earth with a loud thud. I felt something brush past, and I was touched by something immeasurably foul. I reeled right back, and then ran back to the house." "And you saw nothing?" "Nothing." Dr. Fanshawe continued, "That night we were awakened by the barking of Pat, our Newfoundland dog. I went downstairs and found him standing, hair erect, looking out the window of the front door. I had my revolver and went to the window, and looking out saw nothing. But Pat was beside himself with terror. 'What is it, Pat?' I said, when there came a violent hammering at the door. 'Who's there?' I yelled. 'I'm armed.' And there being no reply, I threw the door open, but there was no one there. No one. I searched the garden, without Pat, who wouldn't come, but found No one. For a week, nothing happened. Then all sorts of noises were heard in the house. Footsteps, heavy breathing, the rattling of door handles, and, most alarming of all, violent pounding on the doors. The servants were terrified. The maid roused us in the middle of the night, screaming, and going to her room, we found her in hysterics. The clothes had been stripped off her bed and thrown in a heap on the floor. She told us something had come into her room and tried to suffocate her. She felt as if all the breath in her body was being sucked out of her. She had seen nothing. We told her it was all a nightmare. But next morning, she was seriously ill and died within a fortnight. O'Donnell wondered if the maid had been healthy before. Rather, Dr. Fanshawe laughed. She was a rosy-cheeked, strong, typical young Canadian. Heart and lungs absolutely sound. I diagnosed her case and was puzzled, for she had died of acute anemia. On the night after our maid's funeral, we were again disturbed by Pat's barking. I got up and went to the bedroom window. The weather was very unsettled. Clouds scudded across the moon, and the wind whistled dolefully through the leaves of the maples. Suddenly I heard the sound of heavy footsteps crunching their way along the gravel drive, and then I got a shock. Coming towards the house with short, quick steps was a tall figure with its head bowed low. Its arms and legs were long and bony, the feet and hands enormous. It was nude, its blue-gray body glowing in the moonlight. The thing came beneath the window and raised its face, which was not human, partially covered with hair, and which had huge eyes glaring with an expression of pure hatred. It was something damned, too utterly vicious and evil for words. Mrs. Fanshawe, who had joined her husband at the window, said, "We were both overcome, and for some seconds neither of us could move. We both just stared. At last it made some slight movement, and my husband, who had his revolver, fired at it. The bullet went right through it and struck the gravel on the path behind it, but the thing was unharmed and moved towards the front door. He fired again, and in my terror I began to pray. And then my husband threw something that struck the thing full in the face, and it vanished. I said to Richard, my husband, "What did you throw?" "A stone I picked up near the quarry," he replied. "I don't know why I threw it, but when you started praying, something told me to throw it." It was quiet after that, and in the morning Richard found and showed me the stone you are looking at now. We had it fixed to the front door and were never troubled again. There was no history attached to the place, Dr. Fanshawe added, and no one we spoke to had ever heard of it being haunted. Now, what do you make of it?" After a moment, O'Donnell replied, "I think this stone is the clue to the mystery. Certain blue rocks, especially those found in lava beds, are known to keep ghosts at bay. My supposition," O'Donnell continued, "is that your place does have a history. It was once badly haunted by spirits of the most dangerous type, which I call elementals or neutrarians. Neutrarians. These neutrarians are spirits that have never had a physical body and are only to be found in very remote and isolated places where the soil is rarely disturbed. They hate human beings. They hate human beings because they covet human bodies. Some Neutrarians can reveal themselves at will. Others must steal vitality from people in order to appear. Now, your house didn't seem to be haunted. It was only when you looked at the quarry that you felt uneasy. The theory that the hauntings originated in the quarry is supported by you finding the blue stone there. It must have been buried there in the past to keep the ghost in check, and when you found it and took it away, the haunting started. It drew its energy and vitality from the maid and drained the life out of her. You saved yourselves when you threw the blue stone at it and then fixed the stone to your front door. But is the haunting to go on forever? Mrs. Fanshawe said. Is there no means of ending it, save by the blue stone? No, O'Donnell said. I think a haunting by a Neutrarian could last forever. Have you heard anything lately about the house? But the Fanshaws knew nothing about the current situation. A year later, Dr. Fanshawe sent O'Donnell the following note. I have been to the house, and the present occupants are leaving. There have been 3 deaths, and they have seen it. It. I have lent them the blue stone. The moral of the story, sung in my best Bob Dylan voice. If some blue ghost won't leave you alone, that's a ghost that must get stoned. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,022 subs in 2022. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix here, that's PX here, while the music was that old school masterpiece, The Ghost Processional, by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.